Okay, so now we can finally get to the exercises. So let me just go to this web page and press exercise 3. And then let's look at what we're supposed to do. So in the first exercise, we are supposed to learn about what's called relational operators and figure out whether they evaluate to true and false. So here are some examples that we are supposed to think a little about, and then we are supposed to check how it works. So let's get to that. So first of all, I want to say that I didn't actually do most of these problems. So it's also going to be a little bit exciting for me if I can figure out how it works. So what we can do here is that we can actually type Python in the console, and that's going to open this, it's called the REPL, but we also typically just call it the Python interpreter or the interactive Python interpreter and so on. That's because we're a little bit loose with the nomenclature. But this is a place where you can directly interact with Python and type in commands. So what we're supposed to do here is that we're supposed to reason about these statements. And I can already spot that there is a little bit of a bug maybe in this problem here, I feel, because it doesn't tell us how to get access to math. So what you need to do, and this is just something you need to know because you read last week's material, but we need to actually import math in order to do this problem. And now what we can do is that we can print out pi like this. So now we're supposed to reason about whether this is true or false. So I think this is true because I think pi is less than 3. And I can test that by just typing in the command here. Oops, not pi, 3, like this. And it'll say false. On the other hand, if I turn this around, it's going to be true. So this is asking, is pi larger than 3, or in simpler terms, is 3.1415669, I can't remember the rest, is that bigger than 3? And that's of course true. So there are a couple of options available here in terms than just less than or greater than. We can also ask if it's equal, like are the two things equal? Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Oopsie doopsie. What am I doing? Like this. And that turns out to be false, of course. Of course, if I had asked something like this, is 4 equal to 4, that would be true. So these operators allow us to compare things, and then this comparison will either be false or true. This value here is like an example of a data type. So what I can actually do in Python is that I can assign this to a variable like this. It looks a little bit odd. Oops, I pressed the wrong button. But in this case, b is actually equal to true in this case. So there's like a special symbol or value built into Python called true, and I can, when I do this kind of evaluation, it evaluates to either true or false, and then I can assign that value to a variable like this. Okay, so let's try to do a couple of other ones. So in this case, we are supposed to say, okay, suppose we define a variable x to be equal to 10. So let's try to do that. We just define x to be equal to 10. Will this statement here then be true or false? So will it be true or false that x is less than 5? And I can see that I have a Danish keyboard. I'm just going to change that. That's why I'm making so many mistakes. It's also because I'm a little clumsy, but it's partly the keyboard's fault. Anyway, will this be true? Well, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen is that this symbol x is going to be put in here by Python, and I press enter, and then it will basically say 10 less than 5. And of course that's false. So we can just check that, and it's actually false. On the other hand, if I done this, it would be true. And pop quiz time, what about this one? That would have been false, because x is not equal to 5. X is in fact equal to 10. One thing you need to be very careful about here is, of course, that you don't do this when you want to compare two things. Because if you do this, nothing happens, because what has actually happened is that I overwritten the variable x, so x is now equal to 5 and not 10, which it was before. Okay. So let's try to look at this. Let's say x is equal to 6. So let's start by defining x as equal to 6. And then they ask us to reason about this statement. Like this. I'm just copy pasting it. So what's going to happen here? Well, first we do this comparison. And this is going to be true. And then Python will compute this one. That's going to be x 6 larger than 5. That's also going to be true. And then it has an AND symbol here. AND simply means that this whole statement is true if and only if this is true and this is true. So let's try to do that and see that it actually values to true. What will happen if we do this? Well, it's actually the same thing. This is just true, this is true. So this statement and this statement, they actually end up doing the same thing, so it's going to be true. Let's try to put in false here. Well, in that case, is it true that something is true and false? No, that's false. And in fact, that is the reason why this would be false, because it ends up taking this form up here. Okay. And this was actually what we needed to test down here. And then we have a statement here that use equality. So let's just do that. X is first equal to 5. And then let's try to test this. And that will turn out to be true. On the other hand, if I updated x, let's use a new variable just for fun. So let's say y is equal to 21. In that case, y equal to 5 will be false, and then we'll have true and false. Well, if one of them is false, the whole thing is false. So that's going to be false. Final problem here. Define a variable y that is true when x is greater than 7. Okay. So let's start by defining x as something. Let's say 100. In that case, we can define a variable. We can first compare whether x is greater than 7. It is. And then we can actually do what I started explaining in the beginning. We can assign this value, which will be evaluated to true. We can put that value into the new variable y that we define like this. So this is how we can do it. In this case, y, what do you think it's going to be? It's going to be true. On the other hand, if I just went up a bit, so I'm using the up arrow here to cycle through. If I updated x to be equal to, let's say, minus 10. In that case, if I reevaluate y, so now I'm just assigning y anew to this value, y is of course going to be false, because this minus 10 greater than 7 is going to evaluate to false, and then y is assigned the value false. You can also confirm this by just printing out y like this. It's false. Okay, so I think that's everything that I have to say about this exercise, and I think that was maybe a little more than what was necessary, but this is where I'm going to end this video. So thanks for your attention.